Hello. The talk this morning comes from sunny Ipswich. So whenever you're listening to this and wherever you are watching it, greetings from one of God's favourite towns. I've been reading this weekend and I came across a quote from Maggie Hambling. Maggie Hambling, of course, the famous Suffolk artist, the sculptor, who made the scallop on Aldborough Beach. And she said that she's decided to give a name to this period of lockdown. She's decided to call it Lockie Lockdown. And I kind of like that. And she says that her relationship with Lockie Lockdown has been changing from day to day and almost from hour to hour. And I can identify with that. Well, perhaps like lots of you, when I'm not looking at a jigsaw, I've been reading magazines and papers and books, and also probably spending far too much time on Facebook, sometimes being totally terrified and sometimes being utterly delighted by what I see. So I've come across lots and lots of words. And as you might expect, some of those words are full of anxiety and concern and sadness and loss and some utter devastation. But I've noticed in the Christian community that not only have all those emotions also been present just as raw, but I've also come across a deep sense of hope. Not an insipid, weak sense of hope like I really hope that I'm going to win the lottery, or I just hope that this will somehow sort itself out at the end, but a profound and almost joyful sense of hope that you could feel in the pit of your stomach. A hope that sort of says, although we can never understand what is going on right now, that somehow, in some way, God has it in hand, that God knows what he's doing, and that God knows, and that God can be trusted. And that's something that I have a firm belief in. I guess some people who aren't Christians might say that sort of hope is a bit naive. Perhaps they might think it's a bit simple. Perhaps they might think Christians are on a completely other planet. And perhaps that's always the way it will be. Well, back when the Christian church was in its very infancy, Paul was writing to Peter, and in one of his letters he says to him and to the Christians that he was with, he says, always be able to give a reason for the hope within you, and always do it with respect, with reverence, with courtesy. Another version of that very famous verse says, always be able to tell anyone who asks you why you have chosen to live the way that you live, and again, do it with utter courtesy. So a question to you today, a question to myself, is this. What would we say if perhaps a neighbour nearby says to us this very week, how can you still believe in God? How can you still be involved in all this stuff when you have seen, just as I've seen, what happened to Mrs. So-and-so down the road? Or perhaps if you're interviewed on air and a journalist says to you, so do you still believe in God? Or perhaps your niece, a loved one, has lost her husband in the most awful of ways, but is genuinely wondering, is there a God? And wants to know what you think. What would you say? What would I say? Do we have the words? A former Archbishop of Canterbury, Rowan Williams, apparently said the following. He was asked if he was on a bus and someone asked him about God, about Christian faith, about what the good news is all about, and he was about to get off the bus in a minute, what would he say? And I've always liked his answer. Apparently he said, I wouldn't get off the bus. Conversations like that are far too precious. I would stay on the bus and talk with that person until they got off the bus. I love that. Well, while we might be wondering about what we would say in such circumstances, our gospel reading reminds us today from John chapter 14 that we are not alone in those circumstances, that the church's superpower, also known as the Holy Spirit, is with us. When Jesus left his disciples all those years ago, he could have just ended by saying a long goodbye, a bit like we say now on Zoom calls, where everyone sort of says, goodbye, 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 nice seeing you, goodbye. Jesus' response was much classier than that. He said three things. He said, I'm going to send you another. I'm going to send you another in my place. And I'm going to send you another in my place who will never leave you. Another in my place who will never leave you. And of course, he was talking about the Holy Spirit. And he called the Holy Spirit the advocate. I looked up in the dictionary earlier on today what an advocate is. An advocate is someone who will publicly support you. Someone who will publicly support you. And I just thought, gosh, we all need an advocate. And not only is the Holy Spirit for us, but the Holy Spirit, we are promised, resides in us and with us. I love the idea that the postal address of the Holy Spirit isn't Jerusalem or somewhere like that. The postal address of the Holy Spirit is me and you. Well, one of the jobs of the Holy Spirit, according to Luke chapter 12, verse 12, that's a verse that's easy to remember. According to that, one of the jobs of the Holy Spirit is to give us the words when we need them. And that is rather wonderful. So when our neighbour asks us what we think, when a journalist asks us, when someone on the bus asks us, when a family member asks us, what is the reason for the hope that we have? The first thing we can do is ask the Holy Spirit, come Holy Spirit, give me the words. The reading from the book of Acts today, one of my favourite books of the whole Bible, gives us three reasons for the hope that we have in us. And the reading comes from Acts chapter 17. It's the most wonderful passage. Paul is at the Areopagus in Athens. I'm glad I managed to say that. It's a place I've been. And he's preaching his heart out to the people of Athens, who, to be honest, aren't that different from the people of Suffolk. And he gives us, during the course of that passage, three reasons to have hope and faith in God. And the first one is to do with creation, and the second is to do with relationship, and the third is to do with the resurrection. So the first is to do with creation. And Paul describes how it is God who created us and God who has given us our breath, which is a particularly poignant phrase at the moment. He's given us our breath, but he's also the one that makes the birds to sing, who created the rainbow and the waves and the streams and all these wonderful things, and us and the planets. The thought is that a God who has the power to do this and chooses to do this is one that we can have hope in, and one who will not desert what he has made. Secondly, Paul talks about us as being offspring of God, or children of God, and that introduces the concept of relationship, of interaction, of love. And that's exactly what Christians experience in their relationship with God, something of this interaction. And we believe that God speaks to us and we speak to him, and God speaks to us through perhaps reading a Bible, or through a time of prayer, perhaps through a conversation with someone, a book we read, sometimes even in church. As an aside, if you're watching this video today and you're thinking to yourself, well, I don't think I have that relationship with God, but I would quite like it, then can I encourage you, because I think this is one of the best times to explore faith, whether you want to do it publicly or whether you want to do it very privately, because there are people around that you can phone, and now there are just so many different websites to help people explore the Christian faith. I love at the moment all the recently redone alpha videos, which are all free online, and every time I watch one of those videos I feel closer to God. Christianity.org.uk is another website that might be useful. Going back to Acts 17, the third thing we hear about, the third reason to give us confidence in our faith is the resurrection of Jesus Christ. In fact, it's so core that Paul says, if the resurrection of Jesus Christ never happened, then our faith is completely in vain. But we do believe in the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And the thinking is that a God who can raise the dead to life is one that is worth putting our hope in. So whether it's during lockdown or sometime afterwards, when someone next asks us for the hope that we have within us, whether it's a neighbour, whether it's someone on the bus, whether it's a family member or a journalist, let's remember that we can ask the Holy Spirit of God to come and give us the words to speak. And let us speak openly and honestly about our relationship with God, about creation and about the resurrection. Though to be honest, what most people want to know is about our relationship with God. They want to know about what makes you tick, what makes me tick. That's the thing that usually really grabs people. Not many people are interested in a big theological debate. So how about trying out this week in word and in deed, taking advantage of this wonderful gift that we have been given, the Church's superpower. Thank you for listening.